Warning! We will be discussing Saw films. There will be simulated movie SFX gore, violence, blood, guts, whatever. Everything in Saw films. And we will also be covering topics like sexual abuse, assault, child abuse, trafficking, and much more, along with general themes of misogyny. If you cannot handle that, this is not the video for you. There will be no more warnings after this. If you cannot handle any of that, get out. Thank you for staying, if you are, and enjoy the video. I love Saw. If you know me personally, I am one of the biggest fans of Saw that I know, and that I think a lot of other people know. Every season is Saw season to me. 10 movies, 16 plus hours of content. Except for the fact that 2 of those films stick out like sore thumbs because they are the polar opposites of each other. Saw 4 and Saw 3D, also known as Saw the Final Chapter, and it turned out to not be the final chapter, but that's not the point here. Saw 4 is what I would consider a movie about women's liberation and would even consider calling it a feminist masterpiece. Whereas Saw 3D is misogynistic trash slop, and while it works for the time that the film came out, slop is slop, alright? Let's get into why I think this. Now, I'm sure the second that you heard me say feminist, some of y'all started tweaking the fuck out. Started losing your minds. We're getting ready to type on your keyboards, crying and moaning, it's not that deep, it's not that deep. Sit your fat ass down and listen. Like, I don't care about your opinion. You don't have to care about mine. Like I said, I love Saw. This is a critique of a film series that I enjoy. I know it might seem shocking to some of you people, but you can actually critique things and continue to love them. Everything has faults, and it will not kill you to listen to someone point those faults out. Alright? So just listen, okay? Thank you. Saw 4 starts out right after the incidents of Saw 3. John Kramer is dead, and while doing an autopsy on his body, they find a tape in his stomach. This is a tape that he ate that was covered in wax. I really like this clip of him eating it because he looks like a rabid dog eating something that it shouldn't. I like it, it's funny, it's good. Anyways, we are introduced once again to Detective Hoffman, who comes in and is listening to the tape. We learn that even though he is dead, the games have just begun, because of course John Kramer is always 3,000 steps ahead of everyone. He already had shit planned. Of course, we might already figure out that Detective Hoffman is the next Jigsaw killer, but to the audience, we don't have to think that yet. We don't know who's going to be the next one, because Amanda got shot and died as well. The main characters of this film are SWAT team officer Daniel Rigg and then Detective Mark Hoffman, but we are quickly introduced to our B-plot characters after a string of murders, specifically including detectives, is introduced. We meet Detective Peter Strom and Detective Lindsay Perez, who are working on the case and trying to milk every single little piece of information that they possibly could out of John Kramer's ex-wife, Jill Tuck. Rigg is knocked out and forced to play within a new Jigsaw game. However, since John Kramer is dead, this new Jigsaw remains unknown, and it appears that he seems to be targeting Rigg for unknown reasons. Of course, we find out those reasons are being that he feels a need to save every single person he comes across, even when it might not be the best idea to do so. And of course, while this isn't a full synopsis, it's just what we need to be able to set up what I'm talking about specifically in this video. The first important trap that we find is the scalping trap, a mechanical chair that you are forced to sit in that will slowly start pulling at your hair with mechanical gears. Soon enough, the pressure will get too strong and it will take your hair and your scalp along with it. But who's in the trap? Well, meet Brenda. She's a prostitute. And a pimp. That's the important part. I'm not gonna lie, when I first watched this film, I was like, he didn't seem like the kind of guy to put a prostitute in a trap for just being a prostitute. You think he'd take sympathy. But then upon further rewatching, if you actually open your eyes, unlike me the first time I watched, you would notice that the photos that flash across the screen are photos of Brenda pimping out young girls to older men. She is involved in child sex trafficking. We learn through the tapes that She would contact these young girls, get them financially dependent on her, and then force them to pay her back through sex work. An extremely, unfortunately, very real thing that happens, and a very, very evil thing. No duh. Of course, despite this, Rig is trying his best to get her out of the trap. She is screaming and thrashing, and he eventually does figure out how to get her out of the trap. Half of her scalp is already off of her head, but nonetheless, she is still alive at the moment. And then she goes to try and kill him, and he throws her, assumingly to the ground, but we get this sick-ass transition. Did you know they did this in one shot, actually? I think that's really cool that they did that. That was just one complete fluid shot, and I think that's awesome. The second trap we arrive at is at the Alexander Motel. When Rig finds the audio tape, it tells him to abduct Ivan Lanzes, who is a violent serial rapist and has escaped justice far too many times. Upon seeing the videos and photos of Ivan's violent crimes, he becomes enraged and forces him into the bedroom trap. The goal of this trap is to pluck your eyes out with a small spike. If you don't do this in time, your limbs, which have been strapped down, will be torn from your body, ultimately killing you. He, of course, fails and is ripped apart by the machine. Rig leaves the motel. The next clue he finds leads him to an elementary school, a school he happens to be familiar with. He once attacked a father in this school by the name of Rex, a man who is suspected of abusing his daughter Jane. Rig is walking down the halls of the school and he finally enters a classroom where he finds Rex and his wife Morgan strapped together with spikes piercing out of one of them, Rex, and Morgan fully alive. Rex has died due to major arteries being ruptured, and blood loss, of course. Labeled the spike trap, it's a rather simple trap. Two people are strapped to each other with spikes piercing through their bodies. The catch is that the spikes go through one person's major arteries while the other person's arteries are not pierced. To avoid bleeding to death, the goal is to remove all the spikes in time, leading to a violent and very painful tug-of-war. Through Morgan's tape, we learn that Jane was not the only victim of Rex's abuse, but Morgan was as well. This trap is a literal allegory for removing the ties that bind them together. And boy, was she ready to fuck him up. Once Rig gets to her, she is hysterical at this point, talking about how she won, how she did it, how she needs to get out of here. However, Rig gets the clues that will lead him to finding Detective Eric Matthews, a man who has been missing since Saw 2 and 3, technically. But he sets off a fire alarm that ensures Morgan will be saved, and he moves on through his mission. As you can tell, I'm not covering the entire film, as much more happens after this. But anyways, we learn that Hoffman is in fact the next Jigsaw. But why is he the next Jigsaw? Well, we have to jump very briefly to Saw 5, where we learn his motives and his first meetings with John Kramer. Yeah, these films are poorly structured, but just hold on. Just hear me out with this, alright? We learn in this film that Mark Hoffman has a sister, Angelina, his only living family. He loved his sister, and she was also a homicide detective working for the Metropolitan Police Department alongside him. Unfortunately, she was violently murdered by her ex-partner, Seth Baxter, a criminal, domestic abuser, and eventually criminal. Seth was eventually charged, but this murder completely broke Hoffman's mind. He was never able to truly recover from the loss of his sister, and this led him to putting Seth Baxter in a trap, the pendulum trap, as a punishment for killing his sister. However, Hoffman was not an apprentice of Jigsaw yet when he made this trap, yet he framed it as a Jigsaw murder. And John Kramer? He was not happy at all about this. He found it disrespectful and distasteful. Don't talk to John Kramer, first of all. Anyways, Hoffman is basically forced into becoming an apprentice. He's stuck between turning Jigsaw in, but having to admit that he was the person behind killing Seth Baxter. Or, maybe you could keep a little secret, join me, put some of these guys in a trap. Of course, we see Hoffman chooses that he is going to continue killing people and become a Jigsaw apprentice. I don't know why that was so difficult to get out. So far, you've probably picked up on the key traits of all of Hoffman's victims, but if you haven't, let me just tell you for the sake of this video. All the victims of rigged trials so far have caused harm to girls. A pimp forcing young girls into sex work, a rapist who got away with his crimes, and a man who abused his wife and daughter. Hoffman has been taking down people who hurt women, just like he did for his sister. It's revenge, plainly put. All of this waters down to how I feel about Saw 4. Saw 4 is a movie about female liberation, for the revenge that so many women who have suffered abuse, sexual assault, the loss of female family members and friends to misogynistic violence. It's a desire, a violent, liberating, gory revenge that brings the freedom and peace to victims. And then we move on to Saw 3D. Saw 3D! The Sins of the Father. It's a movie. I don't like Saw 3D, and neither should you. From pink blood to crabby traps, to the horrible deconstruction of characters we've been watching get built up since the beginning, it's just a huge mess. But why do I think that it's the polar opposite of Saw 4? Well, here you go. Saw 3D begins with 3 new characters that we've never met before: Brad, Ryan, and Dina. They're stuck in a trap, which is inside of a plexiglass box in public, in view of everyone, in what looks like to be New York. So, kinda crazy. But as you can tell, I'm already far less enthusiastic to talk about this film. This trap is caused because Dina was playing these 2 boys, and while playing them, they broke laws for her. The laws seem to be petty crimes, but I don't know. All the Jigsaw killers are weird and a little stupid, that's kind of the point. But bros before hoes, or whatever. Instead of trying to kill each other, the 2 men decide to gang up on Dina and chop her in half. With the corniest line you've ever heard.
Think we're breaking up with you, Dina?
It's giving Marvel movie. But it's already pretty bad. The acting, the SFX, the wardrobes. It's bad. It's really bad. From the immediate over-sexualized perspective and the outfit of Dina, to the entire trap just being bros before hoes, she played us and doesn't focus more on the, laws that they broke. We're already off to a terrible start. But anyways, the main focus of this film is on 3 characters: Jill Tuck, Mark Hoffman, and Bobby Dagan. Today, though, we're mainly going to be focusing on the B-plot, which is, of course, between Mark Hoffman and Jill Tuck. In Saw 3D, Mark has set up a trap for Bobby Dagan, a man who lied about surviving a Saw trap and earned fame and money along the way, exploiting the real victims of John Kramer's previous traps, and even getting his friends in on it, allowing them to peddle the lies and save his own ass. In the Saw universe, this is possibly the worst thing you could possibly ever do. Like, oh my god, that's insane. If there's a bad idea to ever exist, that's the worst idea to ever exist. Like, I'm sorry, it's been established that John Kramer's a fucking psychopath and everyone who follows him is a fucking psychopath. Don't mess with them. Don't be stupid. If there's one thing that will get you put into a Saw trap, it's definitely that. However, the biggest issue with the film, in my opinion, is that Detective Hoffman and Jill Tuck's characters have been completely destroyed and deconstructed in this film. It's actually incredibly sad how this film was scrapped, brought back, rewritten. Lionsgate made it hell to produce this film, and while I don't want to put everything on the producers, the scriptwriters, the director, I'm not the biggest fans of them.
I agree, I love the scene.
Have you ever jumped at this scene?
No. This is one of the great scenes. This is where producers really come in handy, because
yeah, I don't really like that they were talking about this scene like that. It's weird, it's creepy, but whatever. In 2010, who cares? Hoffman goes from a calculated killer to a brutal, aggressive, domineering monster whose entire motive for the film is to hunt down and kill Jill Tuck. Of course, Jill Tuck did try to kill him in a reverse bear trap at the end of the last film, ultimately failing. However, in this film, he is incredibly overpowered and bastardized. This film basically tries to make Hoffman look like this angry, horny dude, and Jill feeding into it. Her weird, overly sexual dream sequence about her own death, Mark grabbing her, getting close to her face. That should have been me there, not her. Anyways, there's a weird tension in the film that just didn't exist before between them. And it doesn't make sense, you know? Why? His motives are aggressive and humiliating. While Bobby, our main character, is going through multiple traps due to being a sneaky little liar and lying about surviving a saw trap. However, there is one victim who truly didn't deserve to be a part of his whole saw trap. And while obviously no one deserves to be put in the saw trap, in the Saw universe, they just did not fit the criteria. And that would be his wife. His wife's death is the brazen bull, which is a real torture device that was created in ancient Greece, where someone is put into the belly of a bronze bull statue and burnt alive. Being burnt alive is an extremely painful and slow death. You will feel everything. She pays for the crimes of her husband, that she was completely unaware of, by the way. A completely innocent woman is slaughtered by the jigsaw killer. Nearing the end of the film, Hoffman tracks down Jill and beats the living shit out of her. Don't know why. Calls her a cunt, calls her a bitch, which is just, wow, oh my god, Jesus Christ. He brutalizes her very aggressively and it's gross, before putting her in the reverse bear trap, giving her no way out, and killing her. We've seen that he can be extremely aggressive and over the top. I mean, in the last film, we saw what he did to the cops at Safe House and Lindsay Perez. But when killing Perez, he wasn't using this weird, creepy, misogynistic language, calling her a bitch or a cunt. He barely spoke to her, actually, only really asking who else knew that he was the jigsaw killer. Hoffman went from a cunning character who shows a lot of sympathy for women who have suffered to a maniac, freaky-ass woman-killing freak who takes pleasure in killing innocent people as well. And honestly, all his swag is gone. He was always manic, because you kind of have to be manic to kill people in such crazy ways, but he's truly become unhinged, and very much not like the man who used to put abusers and rapists and pimps into traps. And of course, we have to move on to the bastardization of my girl boss, Jill Tuck. Jill Tuck's character was developed over the last few films, and we know her as a smart, cunning woman who is the ex-wife of John Kramer, and has decided to take on his final wishes that he gave to her. Saw 3D fucks her over. Just as it does for everyone else in the film, it turns her into a bastardization of which she once was. From a calm, calculated, smart woman who holds her ground, to a sniveling, fearful, weak crybaby who can't handle herself in any situation, immediately crying for help when she sees Mark in the room with her at the safe house. A woman who wasn't sexualized previously is now having her boob fly at the screen in 3D. Because, of course, whatever was going on in the 2010s, whatever was going on in the water, it was bad. It was bad. And as you can tell, I've been rushing through the part of this video that is talking about Saw 3D because it's painful to watch and it's horrible that I want to avoid talking about it. Oh, and Lawrence Gordon is here too. Check out this awesome scene. We're at the very end of this video, so if you made it this far, I don't like Saw 3D, not just because of its misogynistic undertones, whether intentional or unintentional, but just because of the fact that it was supposed to be a send-off to Saw. And if it had been, Jesus. What a train wreck. Like, it's, there's different reasons as to why I think Spiral and Jigsaw are bad films, but they were being promoted as sending off a film series, like Saw 3D was. I don't like to consider Saw 3D as canon. I just don't, it's bad. Even if you disagree with me, oh, it's not misogynistic, blah blah blah, you can't act like it's good. You can't look me dead in the eyes and say, yeah, I enjoyed Saw 3D, I think it's a good film. No, you can't. Anyways, thank you for watching, and maybe one day I'll make another YouTube video, but I don't know, maybe the next 10, 20,000 years? This has been Seth. Thank you so much for watching.